And new overnight, U.S. forces unleashing a new round of strikes against Iran in the 9th straight day of attacks. CENTCOM forces further hitting Iranian military targets, degrading Iran's ability to hit commercial ships crossing the Strait of Hormuz. This follows the death of at least 2 American service members over the weekend, hit by strikes by an IRGC missile attack over the weekend on a U.S. military base in Jordan. Another U.S. service member still missing. Here's the commander-in-chief yesterday.
Those great people, those great patriots were out there fighting that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Iran has been very, very badly damaged. We hit them very hard again tonight. And we did that in honor of the probably 3 as opposed to 2 great patriots. This is a far bigger job that we're doing. We were doing a little job of stopping them from having a certain capability. Now we're just ending it. So it's really not the same thing. What we're doing now is we're ending any chance where they can have a nuclear missile.
American forces, meanwhile, tightening the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. Central Command redirecting 6 commercial ships on Sunday after a vessel caught fire 8 miles off of the coast of Oman. Joining me now is the U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker. Ambassador, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for weighing in on all of this morning. What is your assessment of the war at this point?
Well, obviously, we start at the most important piece, which is what President Trump just said, is that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. And so this effort has been to denuclearize Iran, to make sure that their capabilities are degraded and they are not capable of that. But we also need to know that President Trump is coming from a first choice of always being peace and diplomacy. And if the Iranians would engage and be serious about resolving this conflict, they would find a willing partner in the United States of America. But, you know, Iran continues to choose violence, continues to attack ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz, and so they're going to reap the consequences. And if they hit us like you saw over the weekend, we're going to hit them back 10 times harder. And that's what President Trump's leadership is demonstrating. And we would prefer peace and to resolve this matter once and for all. But if they want to continue to fight, we will continue to rain significant and devastating blows down on them.
Do you think that the sentiment from our NATO allies has changed in this war? I mean, initially, really a pushback, an unwillingness to actually support the president's agenda and join this fight. Has that changed in any way?
Oh, I think it's changed significantly. We saw that a couple weeks ago in Ankara, Turkey, at the summit, where you heard around the table leaders of the NATO countries offering capabilities, offering support, and I think that's been refreshing. We've also flown over 5,000 missions out of our bases here in Europe, and that has certainly supported the effort and continues to support the effort. But we are seeing ships and other capabilities show up in the Gulf from our NATO allies as well, and that's been much different from the start of the war. So I think it's been a whole 180-degree turn already, and I think we're seeing our allies being willing to help however they can.
Yeah, and I think our Middle Eastern allies want to see President Trump finish the job here. Ambassador, the president of Lebanon is set to meet with President Trump at the White House tomorrow to discuss plans to stop the fighting here between Israel and Hezbollah and fully disarm the Iran-backed terrorist group. Your take on what could get done from the president of Lebanon. And here is the former Middle East envoy, Morgan Ortagus, on this with me here yesterday. Watch this.
And try to remind the American people what a precarious position that the president of Lebanon is in. He is the only Christian head of state in the Middle East, and really the only place where you have a thriving Christian community. And so it's really important that we protect them. We cannot, for years and years, since basically the 2006 war between Hezbollah and Israel, Hezbollah really infiltrated Lebanese society like a cancer, every facet of their government. And President Aoun has done something that really is unprecedented. You've not seen this in years, which is you have a head of state in Lebanon that is standing up and saying Hezbollah must be disarmed, and he's saying that he wants peace. And so I'm really very happy that President Trump invited President Aoun to the White House. I think President Aoun deserves this recognition. Listen, it is consequential and crucial for American national security that Hezbollah is armed and that Israel and Lebanon, neighbors, become peaceful again. And that, I think, is a part of President Trump's history, not only from Abraham Accords that I was a part of in Trump 1, but for the further of expansion of Abraham Accords in Trump 2, which I believe before this term is over, Lebanon will be a part of.
Right. Ambassador, your thoughts on what can get done with the president of Lebanon at the White House tomorrow?
Well, I think a significant progress can be made. But remember, Hezbollah is obviously an Iranian proxy group. All their funding and support comes from Iran to try to destabilize the region and sow conflict with Israel. And so there's no doubt that Israel needs Hezbollah de-armed and marginalized and no longer causing the challenges that they presented on the northern border for Israel. And I think this meeting with President Trump and the president of Lebanon is a really good step to come up with a joint strategy, how the U.S. can support their efforts to make sure that Hezbollah is de-armed. But ultimately, you know, for the security of Israel and for the security of the Middle East, Hezbollah as an Iranian proxy needs to be degraded. And I think by degrading Iran, what we're seeing is that's having consequences in places like Lebanon.
Yeah, and I think most free nations understand this, what needs to be done in the face of these adversaries and terrorists on the march. What about Europe? You've said Europe is increasing its NATO defense spending following that summit in Turkey. It's been one of President Trump's main complaints against the alliance. Do you think there's still efforts to actually increase spending on defense?
In The Hague a year and a half ago, we got the 5% agreement, and now we're seeing allies move out, and that's turning into billions of dollars spent. I think the number over the last year plus has been $139 billion, with over half of that being spent in the United States, creating U.S. jobs. Over the course of President Trump's 2 terms, you've seen European allies spend an additional $1.2 trillion on their own defense. And as Europe becomes more capable, that frees the United States up to take care of our global interests. And ultimately, I think it secures the transition of the conventional defense of Europe to where it should be. European allies spending European taxpayer dollar to provide for their own defense, and that's a win-win. And that is the America First foreign policy in action. And we've had a great first year. We saw that in the first report card in Ankara, and I think we're going to expect that now for years to come, because this is a long-term project that President Trump has set in motion, and it's yielding real dividends both for the United States and for the people of the United States, most importantly.
Yeah, it's just extraordinary what President Trump has been able to do with regard to defense spending from our NATO partners, truly. Ambassador, it's great to see you this morning. We so appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.
All right, good to see you again, Maria. Thank you.
All right, Matthew Whitaker joining us this morning. Quick break, and we've got a lot coming up. Stay with us. We're checking markets on the other side of this break.